imagine we'll see some pretty intense strikes against Iranian militias in Syria and possibly in Iraq, but do so in a manner that doesn't involve the killing of too many of these Iranian militia types, lest
Yes.
that result in yet another round of fighting. So it's a delicate balance.
Your analysis of this reported agreement between Israel involving the United States, Egypt, and Qatar on a hostage deal to put to Hamas. Are you at all optimistic that might make any progress?
Yes, I am reasonably optimistic, and so is the Biden administration. I think your correspondent got it exactly right. The unresolved question so far, I think, is whether this is really going to be a permanent end of the war, or whether they'll agree to a 60-day pause and release the civilian hostages, and then wait for the IDF hostages and the potential extension of it, as time goes by. It
Yes.
remains to be seen how much Hamas is interested in that kind of deal. My sense is it really serves their interests right now, in terms of giving them an opportunity to regroup and allow some humanitarian assistance. And I think it serves Biden's interests very strongly, in the sense that this regional situation is on the verge of exploding way beyond what we can control. And I think the only way really to stop that trend is to have a pause in the fighting in Gaza, where there's only so much we can do militarily against obviously the Houthis, and then whatever Iranian-backed militias were involved in this attack on U.S. forces in
Yes.
Jordan. So I think this just increases the onus on the United States and our allies to find a way to a ceasefire.
Right, so your betting is that there will be some sort of agreed temporary pause, not necessarily a permanent pause. Israel seems to be in no mood for such a pause, but maybe a temporary pause. Now, I mean, look at the what happened after the attack on U.S. forces on the Jordanian side of the Syria border. The president has a delicate judgment to make, doesn't he, on the nature and the intensity of the inevitable response?
Yes, absolutely. It's a very delicate balance between establishing deterrence, which we clearly have not established to date, but also preventing further escalation here. So how Biden goes about striking that balance remains to be seen. I think your correspondent was right. I imagine we'll see some pretty intense strikes against Iranian militias in Syria and possibly in Iraq, but do so in a manner that doesn't involve the killing of too many of these Iranian militia types, lest
Yes.
that result in yet another round of fighting. So it's a delicate balance. I don't think Tehran wants a war, though, and I don't think the Biden folks think Tehran wants a war. In fact, I don't think it's clear to them right now whether Tehran intended to actually kill U.S. soldiers in this operation, or whether it was, one of a series of over 100 of these things that just happened to work better
Yes.
than the others had, or whether the Iranian militias inside of Syria did this on their own. So I think we're trying to assess how much blame really Tehran has. In any event, it's clear that they exercise some control over these guys. So creating a deterrent for Tehran is critical.
Right. So is there some grim comfort, and I emphasize grim, in the idea that Iran does not want a full-on conflict with the United States, in which one imagines, well, Israel would have a part, maybe Britain as well as others?
Yeah, I think that there is some comfort in that. At the same time, Iran has a lot of cards it can play to increase pressure on the United States and our allies indirectly. And I'm thinking primarily about Hezbollah here. All the talk of regional escalation, it's all of great concern and very important. But the Hezbollah risk on the northern border with Israel is far and away the biggest potential crisis in terms of regional escalation. So whatever we do will be done with an eye towards ensuring that it doesn't get Hezbollah more directly involved in the war with Israel in the north.
Right. I mean, just this last question. I mean, it's an election year in the United States. How far does that coming election and the very real possibility of a change of administration in the White House, how far does that bear on U.S. thinking in Washington, D.C. about the Middle East, about these questions in the region?
That's a really good question, and it's multifaceted. The considerations there. Obviously, President Biden is coming under a lot of pressure from the left to stop the killing in Gaza, to allow much more humanitarian assistance in, and also particularly in Michigan. There's a lot of Arab American voters in Michigan, which is probably the most important state in the whole presidential election, who are really speaking out very loudly against President Biden and his policies. And I know that's of great concern to the White House. So on the one hand, you have political pressure on the left. On the other hand, you're now seeing a little bit more political pressure on the right from President Trump and his folks. You saw Lindsey Graham a call for U.S. attacks on Tehran. Other Republicans have joined in there. So there's a balance of inputs there in the United States that President Biden has to consider for the presidential campaign. But I think that all roads lead to a ceasefire there in terms of what's in Biden's political interest.
Interesting view. Just last question. I mean, America has been part of conversations about at least drawing up a draft accord for the Middle East involving Saudi Arabia, recognizing Israel with a two-state solution in Palestine as the ultimate objective. Is that a futile dream, the way things are?
Well, it's not a futile dream. It's an important to keep that political horizon open, but I don't think it's realistic right now. I don't think that the Israelis are going to agree to the kind of steps towards a two-state solution that the Saudis would require in terms of normalization. But I do think that there's a dialogue to be had there between Israel, the Sunni Arab countries, and the United States around a series of issues. How are we going to deal with Iran together? What's the plan for rebuilding Gaza? How are we going to get more humanitarian assistance in there? And so I think that this creates an incentive that will help move the dialogue forward in a number of other areas. But I don't think that a two-state solution is in the cards for the next 12 months anyway.